make it. And then also we may want to review the time. Maybe the next one we do, we should start a little bit later, but yeah, so please in the comment section or just let us know what you think about the time. If we should maybe make it a bit later just to make it easier for people to join.
Yeah. Oh, Jessica says later.
Later, okay. Later as in an hour later, 2 hours. So yeah, come up with a suggestion. 6 o'clock, 6:30, what would work?
Hour, okay. So anything after 6, but not too late.
Yeah. We are all tired. Perfect.
That hour, yeah. Okay.
I will do that. Okay, one more minute and then we'll start. And then you guys can share, can share this first try at our student/intern/comm service / whoever wants to join webinar. Okay, Lou, shall we start?
Oh, there's one more.
There's more.
There we go. Okay, we're on 20. I think that's a good.
Okay, 20 is a
great
nice.
schedule.
20,
Oh,
21. 21, it's a great number to start on.
Yeah.
So everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. It's awesome. I can't see your little faces. I wish I could. It would have been so much better to be able to do this in person as always, but I think this way we can get more people involved, we can hear more voices, we can have better conversation. So the reason why we are here, why we decided at Project Flamingo, why I told Lou we need to do this for not only our students, but also our young doctors. And I may be completely wrong, but I get a very clear sense whenever I'm in the hospital, wherever I go and I interact with students or with young doctors, that there's a lot to actually talk about, and there's no real safe space in the system, in inverted commas, where people can discuss certain things, whether it's asking hard questions, figuring hard stuff out, sharing difficult experiences, learning from one another. That space certainly did not exist when I grew up in the system. And I truly believe that if we are going to create doctors that's going to make a real change in this country in the future, we need to start doing things a little bit differently. So this is my and our sort of very simple attempt at starting to create that space, that conversation space where we can come together, we can learn from each other. I can share some of my very hard learned and, sometimes not pleasant lessons with all of you, so that hopefully you can learn from my mistakes and you can learn from my experiences so that your road is just a little bit easier. I also think that it's so important for all of you to feel heard, to feel that you indeed have a very, very important purpose and calling in this country in medicine. And I want to keep all of you here. I want to keep all of you motivated to stay. So that is why we are here. It is for you, our future change makers, to feel like you have a space that is outside of the traditional system that you need to function in, a system that can be very, very hard, where we can learn and we can grow together. So that also means that all of us that's here, we're going to treat the space with respect. This is not going to work if this is going to be a one-way monologue from my side. So for today, I'm going to do most of the talking just so that you all can get comfortable and you can get a feeling and a sense of where we want to go with this. But I really want to ask that you interact, that you feel free to put up your hand, make a comment, type it if you don't want to speak, if you're too shy, and if you don't even want to, if you want to stay anonymous and you want to make a comment, or you want to ask a hard question and you don't want other people to know who you are, you can actually send an email. So Lou is sitting with the inbox open, so you can send an email and say anonymous, want to remain anonymous, and you can post your question there, and then she will put it forward anonymously, so that you all feel safe and you feel that you can actually ask what you want to ask, comment on something that doesn't make sense, or challenge something that I'm saying that's not sitting right with you. So I can't see your faces, so I'm just going to hope that you are all nodding and saying we can agree to treat this space as such, and really feel comfortable to interact, because that is how all of us are going to get the most out of this experience. Okay, so I thought today I think all of you that's here have some sense of what Project Flamingo is, what we do, what we stand for. But I thought it may be good for you to hear a little bit more about the origin story of Project Flamingo. And I'm going to sprinkle it with a little bit of the things that's not generally known out there about the origin story of Project Flamingo, and that includes my personal experience. So where I was in my career when I started Project Flamingo, what was going on in my head, what was going on in my heart. And I'm going to be very vulnerable with you. I'm going to share some failures with you that not a lot of people actually know about out there, but I think it's important for you to hear. And I think that is what is lacking in our system, our inability and our unwillingness to be open and to be vulnerable and to be honest with one another. So we all know Project Flamingo now as a wonderful organization, even if I have to say so myself, that is doing lots of great work with a host of incredible people. I cannot emphasize enough the Earth angels that somehow decided to hook their wagon onto mine and to actually make this happen. This is not a one-woman story. This is truly the story of a community coming together. But to give you a little bit of that inside info, so you can see all the happy faces now, things that's running mostly smoothly. But where I was when I created Project Flamingos, I was 27 years old. I have just returned from community service that I did in Barberton in Mpumalanga. It was a very traumatic year for me. So I came out of that year fairly traumatized. It was a small hospital, no real support. We did things that we were not at all equipped to do. I'm sure you all know these stories, but, I arrived there after a 28-hour car trip from Cape Town to Barberton and Mpumalanga. I arrived there. I was the first community service doctor to arrive, and I arrived so that I have 2 days to settle in. As I arrived there, I was told that my hospital, the accommodation that the hospital was going to provide was a caravan parked at the back of the hospital, right next to the local informal settlement. So that that was quite a jarring a jarring check with reality. I didn't stay there long. I found another accommodation very quickly. But I was also told that I would be on call that night since I'm the only one that's there. That night, I lost my very first patient as I was expected to cut an emergency cesarean section, which I've never done as an intern. I was an intern at Roodt Hospital, so I only assisted, but there was no one else. The patient happened to have a placenta accreta, so both mom and baby died that night on my watch. So that was my start to my community service. And the rest of the year did not pan out much better. So to say that I was fairly fragile when I arrived back in Cape Town is is not an understatement. I was quite keen at that point, despite my experiences, that I was curious about the surgical disciplines. And as you were all very familiar with the fast train that we are expected to be on in medicine, you're right. You need to finish your 6th year, then you get put onto the next train station, internship, go internship, next day comm service. While you're in comm service, you need to do diplomas. While you're doing diplomas, you need to start thinking about primaries, all of those things. So I was very much on that train. I didn't realize that this train can be quite dangerous, and I decided that I will write my surgical primaries that year. That just as soon as I'm done with my comm service, my first year as a medical officer, I got a job at Groote at GF Jooste Hospital. It's in Manenberg as a surgical MO. I also just broke up with with my boyfriend of the time. It was really, really traumatic. All was in shambles, and I didn't study a single word. If I say I didn't open a single textbook before that exam, I am not exaggerating. But I went, I wrote, and I obviously failed. A first very big failure for me. So first exam that I failed. Anyway, so really odd headspace. First really big failure. But of course I was going to fail. What was I thinking? Like writing an exam that I did not study for, just because I felt that I needed to write the exam because it was the next thing to do. And quite honestly, I spoke to my parents. I was like, what am I doing? I'm not supposed to do this job. This is awful. I drive into Manenberg every day. It's dangerous. I never sleep. I never eat. The hospital is falling apart. It's looking absolutely horrendous. And my dad said something, and I think some people think it may have been harsh, but it's something that I came back to quite often. And in a weird way, it made a hell of a lot of sense to me. And he said to me, my girl, if you sign up for the army, you should be willing to go to war. And I thought about that a lot. And I sat with that quite a lot. Said, well, if I'm going to get through this year, if I'm going to not quit now, I need to figure out a way to make this more joyful, more sustainable for me. And I made a pact with myself that I would go to the hospital and that every space that I leave would be a little bit better for me and therefore also a little bit better for the people around me. So I started with something really simple. The ward looked like a goddamn war zone. It was awful. So I went to the nursery and I bought a bunch of plants, and I just, I put plants everywhere. They died and I replaced them several times that year, but everybody felt a lot better. I felt better walking into the ward. The next thing I did is I painted the doctor's tea room in the in the theater complex because it was an awful brown, and I painted it something nice. I didn't get permission. I got rubbed over the knuckles for doing it. I had to apologize, but everybody was very happy that I did it. Then I got old magazines from friends, from family, everywhere, and I just put heaps of magazines everywhere in the hospital. Those magazines flew, and I didn't know where they were going until the staff started thanking me because they said they used it for their kids' when they had to do a task or something at school, they now finally had something where they can show them pretty pictures, tear out pictures. Patients told them, one patient told me she used some of the pictures that was really pretty that she put up in a room at home to make her feel better. Patients put the pictures up that they liked next to their beds. So small, tiny, ridiculous things that really somehow started to make me feel a little bit more alive, and like all the senseless, crazy things that I was busy with in the hospital as a surgical MO seemed just a little bit more palatable, and it actually started feeling like I'm making a difference. So strangely enough, it was not the operations that I was doing that made me feel like I was making a difference, but these small, silly things. Yeah, and you can, so that was the mindset. That was the mindset that kind of led to the birth of Project Flamingo. So you can go read about the origin story, but basically it was me figuring out that the breast cancer patients are waiting a really long time for their operations, calling Groote Schuur, finding out why that is, just no theatre time, no staff. And I actually asked one of the Groote Schuur consultants to come and teach me to do mastectomies, because we weren't doing mastectomies at Jooste at that point. And I started doing some of Groote Schuur's backlog mastectomies at Jooste. I really enjoyed it because I thought this is a unique skill set that I've learned before my peers. I was teaching registrars now that was rotating through Jooste how to do a mastectomy, how to treat a breast patient, but it still wasn't enough to make a big enough impact on the system. So with my wine club, yeah, I was in a wine club. We decided, long story, but anyway, we decided we need funds. We're going to do catch-up surgeries. We're going to open theaters on a Saturday. We're going to pay the nursing staff. We're going to pay for the consumables, and I'm going to operate, and I'm going to bribe all my anesthetic friends, and we're gonna clear this waiting list. Long story short, that was the birth of Project Flamingo 14 years ago. Okay, so but what I've learned, and the moral of the story, and why I'm telling it to you in this way, there's a lot of other details, but what I want you to hear, and why I think it's important for you to hear, is that we often look at people in the system, and I've looked at a lot of people that I deeply respect, that's very senior to me, that's decades in front of me in their career, and I look at them and I think, I put them on a pedestal, and I think their lives must be perfect. They must have everything figured out. They must be the most efficient, most organized people in the world. They must be extraordinarily intelligent. I can never do that. And I've placed this enormous pressure on myself to be perfect and to live up to people that I've discovered doesn't exist. We are all human. We are all so very, very, very human. Some more willing to admit to it than others. But the nugget that I wanted you to take out of this is, I was a young woman, probably clinically depressed, undiagnosed, really confused, deeply traumatized, seeking for a reason to stay in medicine. When this project was created, almost as a fluke, as a desperate way to try and make meaning of a system that's broken, of a system that's not working, of trying to find the smallest way to make this better. And I've kept that. I've kept that since then, throughout registrar training, throughout junior consultancy, still now, whenever I go into a ward, whenever I go into a clinic, the first thing I do is I clear up the space. I throw out the papers. I organize the drawer. Why? Not because I'm OCD, but I think I feel better, the space feels better. Therefore, hopefully everybody that comes into that space feels better, and maybe the patient also has a better experience. It is something stupid, but it can make a small difference, and it's about an attitude. And it's that I hope I can help cultivate in all of you, even though you are sitting in a system that's doing its very best to to steal the last bit of your humanity. So here we want to restore humanity, we want to restore honest conversations, we want to talk about our failures, we want to talk about our fears, and we want to recognize that sometimes it is not grand and fancy things that we do that ultimately makes the biggest difference, and that small and crazy little things we do can really culminate and grow into something that has a spectacular and unexpected outcome and longevity. Um, so that is the origin story of Project Flamingo. That, some of the details, I've never really, the personal details that I've never shared, but I think it's important for you to actually know this. If we are going to be future change makers, I don't know if you guys are being taught advocacy in medical school now, certainly not in the curriculums that I'm seeing. I wasn't taught anything about advocacy. I wasn't taught about advocacy for my patients, and I certainly wasn't taught advocacy for myself. I didn't even quite know what the word meant, and I had to self-learn and figure out what it is. And for a very long time, actually, I confused advocacy with activism. I thought, I saw the person standing in the street screaming with a poster and toying, and I thought that was advocacy, and I was like, oh, I can't do that, and oh, people are going to be angry. And advocacy and activism often goes together, but they are two very different things, and one needs the other to survive. But before we can exercise really meaningful activism, we need to understand advocacy. And advocacy is really where most doctors fail dismally, because we are not taught that it is actually part of our responsibility to advocate for our patients, to advocate for better care, to advocate for a better system, to hold people accountable on behalf of our patients, and that we owe it to ourselves as well. Because I think what's happening in the system where we are trying to survive, very often we get to a situation where we look at people around us and we really have to ask ourselves, are we just too broken to care? We are so tired, we are so exhausted, we are so abused that really we couldn't give a shit anymore. There is just no more shits to give. And that's a problem. It's a big, big problem. So how do we start to make ourselves whole again so that we care enough so that we can fulfill these roles of advocacy? Can we get to a point where we can even imagine a different reality? Because when we are so deep into something and we're so sucked into this, it becomes really, really hard to imagine a different way of doing things. And it's very easy to say, this is just how it is. It's fucked up. Sorry. Oh, disclaimer on this webinar, I swear. So you're just going to get that. So apologies, please don't be offended. That's just how I speak. And we say, it is what it is. And it's sitting with that dichotomy the whole time. Yes, to a certain degree, it is what it is. And in some way, we have to learn and we have to build the resilience sometimes just to sit with something that's broken and admit that it is broken. And yet, on the other hand, we have to have the resilience to say, maybe there is something I can do. Maybe even if I move the situation a millimeter forward, there is something that I can do. And it's holding those two things together. It's difficult, and nobody teaches us how to do it. What I can tell you is, and I hope we can really do a deep dive into this as we do more of these webinars and we have more of these occasions. And if you guys like this, then maybe we do more than 4 this year. If you don't like it, then we stick to the 4 and we see how far we get. But what is incredibly important is for everyone to first of all realize that advocacy starts at home, and by home I mean on the inside. It is first and foremost an inside job. You really, really need to know yourself, okay? Which means, and we will in other webinars, I really hope to do a very deep dive with you into self-care and self-knowledge, because we cannot do this job if we don't do that inside job. It is also very important to recognize and to realize that if it doesn't bother you, don't bother. What I mean by that is if a cause doesn't shake something in you, if it doesn't irk you, if it doesn't just, it irritates the living shit out of you, you know something is wrong. It's like a knowing. It bothers you. It's a call. You need to do something. If it doesn't bother you, don't get involved because you think it's the right thing to do. Don't get involved because you think you're going to get a gold star on your head, on your forehead. It just adds to your to-do list that's already too full. And I know it's too full because I've been there. So if it doesn't bother you, don't bother. Pick something that bothers you. And that goes with the second point. If you have the ache, meaning something is bothering you, it's hurting you, it's making you sad, it's breaking your heart, you think it's wrong, you have what it takes. You wouldn't have that if you don't have deep inside of you the skill set to move the needle. I deeply believe it. If you feel something, if it breaks your heart, if it bothers you, there is something in you that you can give to make it better. Advocacy primarily requires us that we can imagine ourselves in someone else's shoes. You have to be able to imagine that you are someone else and that someone else may be you. You have to be able to walk into someone else's shoes and get out of your own head. You need to be able to see circumstances for what they really are, that are very often very, very, very different from what you are used to, the frame of reference that you grew up with, the comfortable bubble that you exist in, whether it is intellectually, whether it is physically, whether it is socioeconomically. It is being willing and being able to transcend those boundaries and those barriers. I also think that to truly become an advocate, we all have to have a little dance with death. And it sounds very morbid, but I'm actually quite serious about it. I think in this job, you can't do this job without really facing head on some very, very existential questions and figure out some answers that make sense for you. Because you are going to dance with death your whole career. And there is a great discomfort and there is great pain in it, but it can become your greatest friend. It can become your greatest ally, your greatest strength, if you can figure out that discomfort and learn to talk and sit with that part of our jobs, to see when we fight, when we absolutely give our all to fight for life, and when we allow dignified death. Okay, that all forms part of advocacy. And the most important probably is to leave your ego at the door. If you are going to be an advocate, it cannot be about you. It's not about your accolades. It's not about the gold star. It's not about a rich post. It's not about a promotion. Because otherwise it's just bullshit. And I can promise you, you're not going to get far. And then that is how we can be the change. All right. So remember, sometimes it is the small things we do that make the big difference. Really, people, if you look at the model of Project Flamingo, it is not bloody rocket science. It's small things, but it culminates into huge impact. Sometimes the solution is very simple. You don't have to be fancy. You don't have to write a research paper about it. Doesn't have to be published in Nature or the Lancet. Yes, thank goodness there are people that need to make those discoveries and make those changes. And maybe some of you are in this room, and I'm very grateful for you. But sometimes solutions can be simple, and they can be incredibly effective and powerful, because we get paralyzed because we think something is not fancy enough, doesn't look good enough, it wouldn't count on a CV. So we should never do nothing because a problem seems too overwhelmingly big and our ability to contribute seems overwhelmingly small. It is like eating an elephant, one bite at a time. Everybody needs to chip away. Everybody needs to do our thing. And where we are in South Africa, putting our hope in our politicians, it's not going to work. Lou was at the Daily Maverick conference, and she came back and she told me, Liana, I wish you were here, because everybody said it is this country and our future, it all depends on the normal guy on the street. It all depends on civil action. It all depends on normal people that's willing to get their hands dirty. Civil action. Be an active citizen. Be an active participant in the very broken system that we are unfortunately part of, but that we can only change if we get our hands dirty. Okay. So that is advocacy, activism, and we can really, if you are interested in it, we can do a really deep dive onto practical ways in which you guys can start implementing it, practicing it, exercise that muscle wherever you are, whether you're a student, an intern, a ComServe, Emma, wherever you are in your career. So the other thing that I hope to explore with you in this webinars is to introduce you a little bit to the principles of integrative medicine. So this changed my life. In 2012, I actually did a diploma in integrative medicine at the University of Stellenbosch. Unfortunately, they are no longer running the course, which is it's a huge loss. But in order to, I think it's been my saving grace to a large extent. And why do I say that? So a lot of people think integrative medicine is all about waving crystals and Reiki and mixing herbs and also trying to operate on. It's not that. Integrative medicine it's a very, very beautiful model of medicine, and really what it boils down to, in my words, or how I see it, is a model of medicine where you are taught that every interaction is with a patient is in fact a holy encounter with bi-directional flow of energy. You cannot, every consultation, every contact that you have with a patient, you can't help but bring bits of yourself into that interaction. So you necessarily, whether you want to or not, will project a lot of your life experience, a lot of your thoughts, a lot of your philosophy, a lot of your beliefs. Invariably, you'll bring that into the consultation with you. And at the same time, so will the patient. And if it is managed and treated with respect, there can be an exchange where you as a healer can also find healing in doing your job. What's that? Healer, heal thyself. I firmly believe that all of us that are called to be doctors and called to be healers do so and are so because we know what is broken. We know we have felt loss. We have experienced pain, and we have a deep desire to make that better. And those parts of us also need to be made whole by this interaction and by what we are doing. So it's a different way of looking at medicine, looking at your patient interactions, and making it true that, you know, we are helping each other. It's moving away from that I am the doctor, you are the patient, I'm telling you what you should do, and I know best and I know better, and because that is fundamentally why I believe we are losing a lot of people to alternative healthcare modalities. I work, as you know, I work almost exclusively with cancer patients, and I cannot explain the amount of time that I have to sit with patients just to convince them to accept my help, because they have such a distorted view of Western medicine. The world out there don't think much of us. There's a fundamental and growing distrust of doctors, of Western medicine, all because of conspiracy theories, big pharma, you name it. But also it is our fault because we have forgotten how to take care of patients, how to touch patients, how to listen to the stories of patients, how to have a sacred exchange with patients. And I can promise you the Reiki therapist is doing that. So that seems a lot nicer than the chemotherapy. But I can give the chemotherapy, and I know the patients are more open to chemotherapy if I hold their hand and I listen to their stories and I'm willing to hear and I give them a choice and I make them feel empowered in their treatment journey. That's a very different way of saying, if you don't take the chemo, then out of here, you're stupid. So it's about realizing that all our stories are intertwined and that is what it is, being human. Okay. Integrative medicine also teaches us that the first patient that you should treat is you. You as a clinician, you as a doctor, you as a healer. If you are not well, it is very, very difficult to do this job in a healthy way. It will destroy you, and you will not be able to do what is best for your patients. You can run very fast. You can go very far. You can get all the accolades in the world. But if this is going to be a career that is meaningful, that is soulful, that does not kill you, that does not destroy your soul, you as your first patient is imperative. Okay. So you need to all ask yourselves, am I well? Am I well? And if you are interested, we can, very open to exploring tools, practices, exercises that we can do, how we can get ourselves to a place of better well-being. And we can do it together. And like I say, this is what this community is for, to be vulnerable, to be honest, to say, I'm struggling, I need help, and to do it in a way that we can actually create a system that works for us as well. Not a system and a profession that has one of the highest suicide rates in the world. This is one of my favorite quotes. So my lecturer, Maria Christodoulou, that taught the course in integrative medicine. This is her words, not mine. I'm still very close to you, and I think homework for all of you will be she's got a podcast. It's called the Awakening Doctor Podcast. I think you should all go and have a listen to it. She has amazing conversations with people in the medical field. And I think those conversations are invaluable. It's conversations that's well overdue. So homework, go and look for, I think it's on it's on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, everywhere, Awakening Doctor Podcast. But this, I think, if we can get all of you to get to a point where you really, really deeply understand this quote, and this becomes the truth with which you practice medicine, then we have a generation of true future change makers. Healing represents an expansion of consciousness and a movement in the direction of wholeness and health. We can be healed by our illnesses. Healed by our illnesses, but not cured of it. Or we can be cured of our illnesses, but not healed by it. Healing may or may not result in cure. So take a screenshot, go think about that, go think about what that means for you as a practitioner, how that may potentially change your approach in how you practice medicine, from what place you practice medicine, and how you interact with your patients. It very closely links to that dance of death, the dance of life, all of that I've referred to. This really puts us, this integrative medicine thing, it really changes the science of medicine and it mixes it with the art of medicines, because if suddenly we are looking at medicine, super important, absolutely crucial, evidence-based medicine. I'm the biggest fan. But it also allows us to explore things like the environment the patient lives in, the teaching mindfulness, looking at the patient's relationships, the scars, the hurts, the unresolved trauma that a patient is sitting with. We look at spirituality, we can look at diet, we can look at exercise. There's a million things that we can pull into the encounter, that we can learn more from, things that we are not taught, but that ultimately will make us better doctors. Okay, so that was now a very long freaking monologue. I hope some of that made sense. I'm going to stop sharing. And yes, questions. So now's the time, people. You've got my ear. Go for it. If you have any questions, type it, put up your hand. I would love to hear from you. Would love to hear what you think. I think what we are also going to do is maybe I will, with Lou, I will draw up a Google form and I'll just throw out some questions, things that I think may be bothering you, maybe it's not bothering you, questions that I think you may have, maybe you don't have them, and we can just share that questionnaire, we can see what comes back, and we can use that to plan our future webinars. But is there anybody, please, anybody with a question, a comment, anything? You've got me. I'm here for you. So speak. Children, speak. At least just give me an indication if I've completely missed the plot, or if if we're heading in the right direction with this space. Marlu.
Okay, I will go.
Please, someone.
So I think, wow, Dr. Roodt, I think this was such an amazing truth that you shared with us. I think I didn't expect this from this webinar, and I am pleasantly shocked and surprised, and I think my eyes were open to the reality as well, and just reflecting as you were speaking about past experiences. And I think I just the kind of having to be that advocate for a patient. I can maybe share an encounter I had in my 4th year internal medicine block, and I had a patient. He was an adult male with cerebral palsy, and was in a home and didn't have any contact with his family. And he was trying to say things to us and to the nurses about his medication that he was not getting. He was trying to tell me, I'm not getting my lamotrigine, I'm supposed to get that, but he was mumbling and no one took him seriously. And I decided, okay, let's try and phone the nursing home. And everyone said, no, it's not necessary, don't do it, don't do it. And the nurses even didn't want to let me use the phone to call the nursing home. Eventually I said, no, I need to. And then I phoned the nursing home and actually found out that he's actually quite good with his medicine, and he knows that what he should be taking and what he's not getting. And by that, we were able just to restart his correct medicine, even though the consultant